in our last property boom, sort of 2013, 14, it used to make the news on the front page. If a property sold for $1 million above reserve, that was like a front page news story. And in the last 2 years, it just happens all the time. How are you supposed to guide for that or estimate that if you're an agent?
You're listening to Elevate, the official podcast of Elite Agent for real estate industry sales professionals, property managers and leaders. With thanks to our partner Connect Now, Elevate brings you the best tools, thinking and strategies to elevate your results. To get access to all of Elite Agent's premium resources, including a detailed episode guide for this podcast, visit joineliteagent.com. And for more information about how Connect Now can make moving easier on your clients, visit connectnow.com.au. Here is your host, Samantha McLean.
Welcome to another episode of the Elevate podcast, where we delve into some of the most interesting minds in business and in real estate for the very best tips and strategies for you to implement to elevate your business. I'm Samantha McLean, editor of Elite Agent and host of today's show. My guest today is from NewsCorp. It's Tim McIntyre. Tim has been in the media for around about 15 years and is the editor of a range of prestige Sydney publications, including one of my favourites, the Wentworth Courier, the Mossman Daily and the North Shore Times. So Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. Great to be here.
So that's a pretty big remit, actually. There's a lot going on there in editing 3 papers and being across real estate across the country. Can you tell us a little bit about your role?
Yeah, so I'm the editor of the 3 community prestige papers, Wentworth Courier, Mossman Daily and North Shore Times. Those are coincidentally in patches of Sydney with a massive prestige real estate reach and, the revenue to stand up print products as well. And I do have a background in real estate journalism, where I came from originally. So they've sort of married up the two to extend my role to include sort of setting the agenda, I guess, for the real estate coverage across Australia that we engage in. What sort of stories are getting, the most sort of the grab with the audiences and where we're going in the digital world. So, yeah, so it's kind of like a mixture of the old school and the new school.
But you and I have something in common. Even though we believe in the internet, we still believe in print, right?
We absolutely believe in print. It's it's a massive part of what we do, and I think in the sort of the demographic that we have for our readers, they don't get the same experience from looking at some of these properties and reading some of these stories on a portal as they do from paging through like beautiful glossy pictures and actually getting a feel for where things are. So that's the point of difference that we have in that part of the print media, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you can put a big image in a glossy magazine, it makes all the difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Much better, like a lot better than when you're sitting on the train and you've got a little sort of a thumbnail to look at, and then, that's not a great user experience. So great for breaking news, but getting your teeth into something and really experiencing it, I think is, we still add a lot of value in the print world.
And so you just mentioned the Wentworth Courier, the Mossman Daily, the North Shore Times, and, that was sort of like my stomping ground when I was living in Sydney, and also happens to be right in the centre of Lux Listings territory, which is about to come back onto our screens again. Are you looking forward to the show's return as much as we are?
Oh, look, I just think it's fascinating. We love real estate in Australia, and it's a great way to show the world how much we punch above our weight, at least when it comes to property. There'd be some people from overseas areas who'd be pretty surprised to see, the sort of properties we have, the sort of prices we're talking about, some of the, the behind the scenes that goes into marketing them and selling them. And we've got some great characters as part of that show as well.
I was going to say they all must have, like Deline and Gavin and Simon must pretty much have you on speed dial, do they? Like
They do, but it's usually it's because they want more coverage in the paper. So that's
no, never.
So job's never done for an agent. So look, Gavin actually has graced the front cover of the Wentworth Courier in the past, a story about his great successful career. And Deline has been an absolute mainstay in our pages for many years now. And yeah, look, they're a big part of what we do, and we really appreciate The fact that we they get their vendors on side with us and getting into the paper, and we hope they get some value out of it as well.
You just said that, you just referred to, like what we know as Australia's obsession with property. In your area, have you seen the audience for real estate content change and grow in recent years?
The audience definitely changes. People are, from what our sort of online, like our digital metrics tell us, there are a lot. People love a story about someone they can relate to. They sort of want them in a lot more bite-sized sort of chunks. It's when I say about stories they can relate to, they want to know that here's someone who's achieved buying a house or getting a great price, selling a house, or just has amassed a big investment portfolio, and rather than them being someone that lives in a different world to me, like it's someone that's actually in my reach, and that's a very good way to get readers engaged. They love data, they love growth areas, hot spotting, those sort of aspects. It just plays into the obsession we have with real estate. It's our great water cooler conversation, as you'd say, or these days it's more of a social media conversation. And just, the wow factor of the amazing properties is always goes very, very well. Oh, and not to mention wherever the Hemsworths are buying. That's a big popular part of what we do.
I have to agree with that. Actually, the celebrity home stories always do well on our website as well, particularly if your name is Hemsworth.
Yeah, look, any chance to see a shirtless Hemsworth with his surfboard under his arm, just on his new compound or about to head off for a surf, like that tends to do pretty well. I'm not sure why, but yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of set the editorial direction for real estate across the country, really. So, what goes into your thinking when you're thinking about, like what sort of stories and things like that you want to put out there in any given moment?
There's standard stories that, everyone in their own neck of the woods knows that people will love, like a great local listing or a trend story, growth or whatnot. But then the sort of stuff we do at a national level, we look at, what audiences are engaging with the most online, whether it's, stories about agents who have sold the most and made big commissions, or if it's about people who have gathered investment properties. But then it's sort of like how to do it. You want to use the data, you want to educate yourself into how to get into property, how to buy, sell property in Australia. When we look at national stories, a lot of it is speaking to data providers, economists, demographers, and harnessing like trends at a greater level. You'll have noticed up there that in southeast Queensland, the property market is going very well. It probably was pretty static there for a long time, and suddenly, bang, it's booming, and so many people are trying to buy properties from interstate there. Southeast Queensland in general has become like the nation's property hotspots, and so when you look at like a national story agenda, it's how do we get that out there, and how do we cover it from wherever we are? Sort of, you got people from Melbourne writing about that, people from Sydney writing about that. And then you got people from Brisbane who might be covering it in a different way, sort of thing. It's more like, people from Sydney, are they driving up our prices? What's our home buying experience like up here now? Whereas down here, we're like, wow, there's still plenty of growth left in the southeast Queensland market. How do you get it? How do you get a piece of that? And so those are the sort of stories that will go across the country, and yeah, like just things like marrying mortgages to income and property values in areas, and just seeing what we find, what we come up with. And those are the sort of things we look at when rolling out national angles.
Yeah, we talked to Elizabeth Tilley a while ago, who's the real estate editor of the Courier Mail up here. And I made the comment to her that, the difference, like I thought people were mad for real estate in Sydney, but as it turns out in Queensland, it's a whole next level of live streaming auctions and all sorts of things, which are really popular here. Are there any sort of peculiarities that you've seen from state to state?
When you look at like the way real estate markets work, the most popular places are wherever is going well. So Brisbane right now has been the source of so much of our engagement at NewsCorp, and Liz Tilley and her team are experiencing how much people get involved when there's a property boom in an area, and most of our subscriptions, like a great ratio of our subscriptions, subscriber page views, time spent on stories online, time spent sharing on social media. Queensland is dominating our market at the moment, which is highly unusual, because traditionally Sydney and Melbourne are the auction markets. They're where you might get 1,000 auctions a week happening. There's always people complaining they can't afford things, and yeah, that's so Brisbane's enjoying that heightened interest in real estate. To look at the characteristics of those markets up there, I would sort of like the peculiarities. I don't know, like until now, places like the Gold Coast haven't really, they sort of go up and down. They fluctuate a little bit, and places like Sydney and Melbourne seem to go nuts and then wait 5 or 10 years and then go nuts again and then wait a few years. You look at somewhere like Adelaide, it's sort of middle heavy. There's not a lot of, prestige versus the lower end of the market. There's a lot more around the $500,000-$600,000 category than there is either side of that. Similar with places like Canberra. Places like Perth overshot its values because of the mining boom a long time ago, and now they're just sort of presenting some value for investors over there. Like it's just such a vast like array of different markets and the things that drive them. And then yet for the first time, and this was the fascinating thing about COVID. For the first time, they were all going off at the same time. Usually one's bottoming out, the other one's taking off, and Tasmania is waiting to see what happens in Victoria, and things filter down. But suddenly, capital cities, major regional centres, everything was growing the last 18 months, and it was phenomenal. So the characteristics of the individual markets are almost out the window for a while there, while we digested what was happening around us, and as Australians like to do, found harbour in property investment.
We might have to get in touch with Jimmy Rees, just as you were talking then, to do a meanwhile in Australian real estate, because it is exactly as you described there, like with the different countries sort of in different states of highs and lows, and, I can still picture Sydney with the cocktail though.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
So I want to get into some ideas for agents on how they can establish themselves as a trusted voice in the media, because obviously we've mentioned a couple of high-profile agents that you work with. But let's start at the beginning, because, we know that there's like owned, earned and paid media. How do you feel like agents should use each of those things when it comes to sort of working with teams like yours?
It's probably a hard thing to do, or it's counterintuitive for a lot of agents who spend so much time getting their face out there, their name out there, and prospecting, knowing, making sure that when someone thinks about transacting on property, they're thinking about that person. When it comes to the media, the best way to get into the media more often is to position yourself as an expert in your field, and that means being able to talk to a journalist and say, and tell them, the truth about what's happening in the market and the truth about why things are selling or they're not selling. In the past, I've interviewed so many real estate agents for stories, and I might ring them up. I need to know why the Hills District is growing so much in Sydney, or why is it good value to buy an investment in Whyalla in Adelaide if I'm living over here in New South Wales. And they'll say something like, well, my superior marketing campaign is the reason that the market's going well for the properties I've sold, or, people come to me with properties that the other agent couldn't sell for them, and I had it gone within a week, like much higher offers, and I straight away I stopped listening because I'm like, well, you're marketing yourself, which I understand is in your interest to do, but if you sort of say, I'm at the coalface in the local market, which a real estate agent always is. They know more about what's happening in their local market than anybody else because they transact in property and they deal in property and prospect for it day in, day out. And so they know what's happening 3 months before it turns up in the CoreLogic data spreadsheet. There's that lag. They can tell you, actually, the market's slowing down now or it's gathering steam now. Registered bidders are through the roof. And that's the information that's really valuable to journalists and to readers. And if you can actually position yourself as a commentator in that area, then you'll find people will keep coming to you to comment, and just organically your face is out there, your voice is out there, and people go, oh, I know that woman, she sells properties in my area all the time. Like, she knows what she's talking about. If I'm going to sell, I'm going to get advice from her. That's as valuable as having your name on the kids' soccer team jersey, or, in my opinion anyway. That's what makes it easy. And the easier you make it for a journalist, like journalists are cynical people, and they're if you're engaging like that is a great way just to get the path of least resistance. I'm just going to call that person because they are great to talk to. They tell me what I want to know. The trade-off is your name's in the paper, it's online. And also, especially in the tabloid media now, if you can serve up a vendor family to get their photo taken, like it serves a great purpose in the print media, especially because we need big, nice pictures of properties, and then it gives them the opportunity to get more eyes on their house without paying extra for ads. So that's kind of it. I think just honest appraisals of your market and a willingness to separate yourself from what's happening there, it just lends more credibility in the media space. And by a journalist, on the side of the journalist, we also need to make sure that we include, like, give it as good a run as we can, and include what you say, and foster that relationship from our end as well. It even translates into guest articles and that sort of thing if you can do it well enough.
So there's a couple of things that you just said there which I might just circle back on because I think that they are really important. So first of all is, if a journalist does happen to call you, out of all the agents that they could possibly call, like it's a good thing not to head straight into the self-promotion path and to actually give a well-rounded view of what you see going on, because actually I can empathise with all that. Sometimes people call me wanting something and they don't even ask me how I am. So, it's journalists are people too and have feelings. So it's really about building those relationships, yeah?
Yeah, it is. And, journalists, we know we also fight against public opinion, because people we're in the same boat, journalists and real estate agents, in that people sort of, they deal with you when they have to. They have a preconceived opinion of what you like based on something that probably doesn't represent most of the industry. And you get all that, but you got a job to do, and like the best job you can do as an agent when it comes to dealing with the media is to be an expert in that field. Fostering relationships is great, and a lot of the agents out there are really great with the media. They know how to speak, how to they learn what a news story is from a reader's perspective. They know that the best thing for a photograph to go with a news story isn't a picture of an agent, it's a picture of a family that readers can, or like a couple or something that readers can actually relate to, and they take a back seat and let their knowledge do the talking in the area. There is so much gold to be harvested from how well a real estate agent knows their local patch. All that sponsorship of local sport, that presence everywhere, the sort of philanthropic stuff that real estate agents do, And just the fact that they know every property in the area and what it should be worth, what it is worth, what its history is, a lot of the local families, it's just absolute gold when it comes to reporting on the news in the real estate.
It's interesting, you just sort of mentioned the, trust issues for both journalists and for real estate agents. And we know that real estate agents sometimes get on the wrong side of the media and, say something that perhaps they didn't mean or, but it was said and the journalist quotes them. Do you have any tips for people that might be new to working with the media, that might be nervous about talking to a journalist about either being taken out of context or, saying the wrong thing?
The tips are, as long as you tell the truth and, you're honest and know what, and you're not trying to sway opinion one way or another when you shouldn't be, that's all you got to do. You're not a politician. All you're doing is saying, well, this is a great house. Everyone expects you to advocate for the properties you're selling and the markets you're selling in. But as long as what you're saying is truthful, that goes to a lot of the way to fostering trust with readers, with journalists, with the public. Don't be shy. Like if you've got something which you think is pretty quirky or interesting, give us a call. Like we love to hear about it. And if we don't, then if you get bad blood from a journalist when you think something's interesting, then that journalist isn't doing their job properly. It's just that's the perception of journalists, I suppose. Like a lot of agents are on their guard. They get in trouble for things like underquoting and whatnot. When the media will say underquoting at times. And again, this is parts of the media. The rest of us, the people who have been reporting on real estate for a long time, know what underquoting is and how it works. And if the market is going off and you've got, let's just say you're an agent, you're selling a house in a particular area where a property hasn't been sold for a couple of years, so you've got nothing to compare it against. All you can do is your very best. We've come up with a guide price or estimate that you give to your vendors. But one of the big parts of a property boom is that there's not a great supply of properties around. So there's a lot of demand for not much supply. So if sales have been scarce, there's actually no way to predict what the final result will be. If you sort of say, look, I think it's worth 1.2 million, and then all of a sudden it gets bid up to 1.7 at auction, or, a lot of buyers will turn around and say, oh, the agent's underquoting. It's not. Like that was the guide, that was the reserve. More people turned up and more people wanted it who had more money than them. But it's very easy for people just to blame real estate agents when properties sell for more than they can afford. But these are the things that will get you on your guard. But, if I was an agent, I'd be very comfortable in sort of, saying that I wasn't underquoting or I was doing the right thing. Like it's one of those things. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are certain aspects of the media which are pretty shonky or pretty hard to cop, and there are certain aspects of a lot of industries like that. But if you've done the right thing and you've got everything in place there and you've got the best you can do, like that's all you can do. And like there's sort of sensationalist news media, and then there's real estate news media, which is who you should be hopefully engaging with, who will actually report the story for what it is, which is, the market's going off and there's so many people trying to buy a property and they can't because there's not enough out there and whatnot. But what we're seeing is massive price rises on the back of this or that. So it's a very convoluted rant that I've just sort of tried to string together in answer to that question. It's
true, because we've just come through exactly what you've described, which is, sometimes agents are being blamed for underquoting, but it's been forces outside their control, and you can't predict from one week to the next with the way the market's been. I mean, it may be a different story in 6 months' time, I guess, but
it could be, and then they'll be blaming the agents for something else, for asking for too much or not marketing it properly because vendors expect just those same ridiculous results to carry on forever and ever. And but they're ridiculous for a reason. Like in our last property boom, sort of 2013, 14, it used to make the news on the front page. If a property sold for $1 million above reserve, that was like a front page news story. And in the last 2 years, it just happens all the time. How are you supposed to guide for that or estimate that if you're an agent? Not to mention that an agent's job isn't to help buyers get a property on the cheap. They're bound by law to get the very best result they can when representing a vendor, and that's what their job is. It's one of those things that people in their head are just going, like they should be helping buyers, but why should they?
It's an interesting conundrum for sure. We had Ryan Serhant on the podcast a couple of months ago, the world's most followed agent. He often talks about working with the media because that's kind of his thing. And one of his recommendations was assembling like a media kit so that you could, approach the media successfully, sort of say, okay, well, here are my credentials, here are my awards, here's all the stuff about me. So a couple of questions on that, just from an Australian point of view, like, do you need to be an award-winning agent in order to receive media attention?
Not at all. You just need to be motivated and driven. And I think in certain countries overseas, celebrate overachievers in a way that Australia really doesn't. And it's kind of like we're more likely to get behind you if you're an underdog or someone who's triumphed over adversity. We recently had a story about this young agent in Western Sydney who managed to sell some insane number, like 300 properties in a year. And by simple calculations, we figured out that his commission was about $7 million. And he was just this normal guy who was like really happy and friendly and just loved real estate and wanted to help people sell their properties and was fascinated by it. And that got so much love. Like, he hasn't won any awards yet. He doesn't drive a convertible. He doesn't live in a mansion. And I feel like that's a sort of story that gets traction anywhere you go. Like,
I think you're talking about Josh Teslin there.
I think I am, yeah.
He's got a couple of nice watches. Maybe not.
Well, there you go.
Maybe not the car, but I've seen them on social media. So let's talk about a media kit. That's the other thing Ryan mentioned to me, is that it's really good for agents to have a media kit. Do you agree with that? What should agents actually have ready to go if they're going to have a chat to a journalist?
Yeah, look, a media kit's great so that everyone knows the best way to get a hold of you, the best way to engage. Like, if you've got like easily to access links of the photos of your properties that you've got, if you've got vendors ready to speak to the media about the local market or their expectations, that sort of preparation will get you straight into media a lot easier than if they've got to ring you 100 times and you wait for you to get back to them and whatnot. So, look, a media kit's fantastic, just so that you've got the background in place. We know about your market knowledge, and we know about the properties you're selling and the people you can introduce us to, and that makes it a lot easier for us on our end.
And I think, if I could add something there too, I think a decent photo that's not a selfie and, is high res as well.
Yeah, look, a presence on social media and multiple platforms is a good thing as well. It makes you more interactive, I suppose. And it's easier to bring out the relatability of people. Things are raw and aren't as polished, sort of thing. That's just a personal vibe I get. I know like a lot of agents use social media to do great things, and find that it's a place for them to drum up a lot of business or to find their way onto a podcast or as a speaker at like a real estate conference or something like that. Different ways of doing things.
What would be your top tips for making a pitch to a journalist if it was a particular property or something like that that an agent thought was worthy of editorial coverage?
Yeah, look, if you're talking about the property itself that you want it covered, something that's either unusual or very glamorous is a great thing. If the property's got a bomb shelter in the backyard, that's going to get it attention, and you get a few of those, sometimes. Or if it's got it might have the world's best man cave, or just certain things like that, or it might have been a converted church. Like those are the sort of things that a lot of people will go for online. And then the other thing is it's got the best view in this part of the world, or it's got these exquisite sort of features and or high tech things like those. Those are for individual properties. I think they're really great. If you're pitching, someone who's like a interesting individual as well might be attached to a property, like whether it's an architect or it could be one from a portfolio of like an investor that's done a crazy amount of properties, or those things are great. And then, but on the flip side to the beautiful features is sometimes you can really you can do well by harping on the bad features. For example, you might be selling some sort of one bedroom bolt hole where the toilet's in the bedroom or something like that, and that's a truth of the property. It's not something you would want to highlight for potential buyers, but if you're talking about reach, that sort of thing ends up on the top of news.com.au and gets read about overseas and picked up by the British tabloids and stuff. And then at least it's a lot more eyes on the property. It's a way to get it out there. In some markets that have been going well, you get a lot of properties which are quite run down and start fetching good prices. So if you're actually honest about that, this place is like a knockdown rebuild rather than a blank canvas or a renovator's delight, or this place is like a hazardous dump. It's selling for $1 million. That gets eyes on it, and the people who are in if the market's allowed you to put that price guide on it in the first place, the people who are interested in buying it are probably going to knock it down anyway. So it's kind of a great way to get some coverage for something that otherwise would be pretty unremarkable. We've had plenty of those in Sydney. They started out as the $1 million dumps, and then they became the $2 and $3 and $4 million dumps or hoarders' houses and things. And a lot of people put eyes on them, but also there's still a lot of buyers because there's people with the money out there to actually go, well, this is how much frontage the property has. This is how big the block is. This is how many bedrooms I could fit on there once I pay someone to knock down the existing property. So it's still a good way to market, to get things into the media.
So if you can see it sort of ending up in the next edition of Bad Real Estate Photos, it's probably newsworthy.
Yeah, it's not so bad. Like we had a great story from about 7 or 8 years ago about a guy who, there was a property that was being marketed as the dump. That was the name of it on the listing portals. And, it turned out, we spoke to the agent. He said, well, the owner wanted to call it that. It was like, righto. So the owner turns out to be this bloke called Baldy. And his name was Ron, but I asked him why he changed his name to Baldy, and he said, "Oh, years ago I used to be an alcoholic, and one night when I was drunk, I went down to the telecom office and told them to change my name to Baldy because that was my nickname." So they did, and it was like Cher or Madonna. It was one name. He didn't have a last name. It was just Baldy. So he's walking around just called Baldy, but he happened to be the owner of this disused boarding house in Milsons Point, which is a swanky part of North Sydney, very close to the harbour and the city, and a 2-story, 7-bedroom boarding house. So it's been marketed as the dump. And luckily enough, at the inspection, they had people walking in there with face masks and hazard suits and stuff to look at the property. And this is in pre-COVID days where it's actually unusual, of course, to see a face mask being worn around town. And it was just great because all these people were going in and out of this place. It looked like it was about to fall down. It looked like a meth lab or something like that, where they were sort of investigating it. And so it's ended up selling for more than $2 million, which I think it was about 2014 or 15 was a a great price in that part of the world. If that person who bought it then had sat on it and done nothing to it, they probably could have sold it again for $5 or $6 million like last year. But it was just a great story, and it got so much coverage because this agent had done up signboards with the dump written on it. It was photographed. It went to America, like the news went to America, to the UK, everywhere. And the funny thing is, out of the blue, I got a phone call from a lady, a fair way up north, who said that she was actually Baldy's long lost niece, and she hadn't seen him for 35 years. And was it okay if I gave her his number? So I contacted Baldy and asked, and he said, yeah, okay. And they ended up going for coffee together, and who knows? But this marketing this property, honestly, it led to a massive result, which was about 500K above what they were guiding. It had international media. It it brought this guy to our attention and then reunited him with his niece. So it was a power of what you can actually do when you do approach the media with that, like a bit of savvy. And yeah, like it was a classic story.
And we all live for those stories, right? The ones that are truly interesting and make a difference and make a mark on the world and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about real estate is that every property for sale has an owner, and they've got their own backstory, and every agent who sells has dealt with so many people, buyers and sellers, and have a million like cracking yarns themselves. So that's great. You can just tell story after story about people, and that is what resonates probably the most in all forms of the media, and definitely in real estate.
Interesting. So one last question on working with the media. Like, I know you guys have got a premium content series or several of them, like Make Your Move and stuff like that, which are national. How can agents possibly get into something like that?
Yeah, okay. So Make Your Move is one of our premium rollouts, and it's more aimed at investors and people who are relocating during the work from home sort of rush of the pandemic period. Just being a part of that it's the same as being a part of anything. Just having been able to talk about trends, being able to relay stories about people who are doing it. Like if you're a real estate agent in a major city, you've probably got an opinion on the value of investing or moving to a regional area. And if you're an agent in a regional area, you've probably got an opinion about what it's been like for your local market to have a lot more interest coming from these sort of cities. So if some sort of data comes back and says, this place is a great place to, let's just say, for example, a lot of people are buying into far north Queensland because people can't travel overseas because of the pandemic. So they're looking at these holiday places up near Cairns and whatnot, and you can't actually, there's nowhere to get accommodation anymore. If you're an agent up there, or if you're an agent who's dealing with a lot of buyers with that sort of thing, you can contact the media and say, I've got a great story for you about that. I've got people who are buying whole resorts here, or I've got people who have seen like the value of their property go up 300% in the last 2 years. There's a lot of ways in. There's endless ways in. It's great to, like in any industry, to be across the news of what is happening in your industry and think about, how does it relate to me? How can I add to the story? What value is it for me to do so? I think that's the best way to be involved with the premium content rollouts and those sort of things.
Yeah, that's really great advice, actually. Well, Tim, it's been fantastic talking to you today, and thank you very much for sharing some of your insights and some of your stories, which are fantastic. If there was one piece of advice or one takeaway that you'd like to leave everyone with, what would it be?
I just think it's tell the truth. Like if you tell the truth and treat people the way you want to be treated. It's what I try to do as a journalist. It's what I think people should do in any job. But as a real estate agent, people who are buyers one day are sellers 5 years later, and they remember the guy or the girl who told them that, actually this place is out of your budget, or don't come to the auction because you'll be disappointed. You're wasting your time. Someone says something like that to you, 2 years later, when you remember that. It's like if you remember being let off a speeding ticket by a policeman or something. Like, you're like, wow, that person was really nice, and I'm going to do the right thing by them. So I want to list with that person because I want them to treat buyers the way I was treated. It's a very valuable tool because the more fans you have for the rest of your life, the more word of mouth you get, the more people are on your side. And if you look at some of the most successful agents, at least that I know of, if you look at a guy like Bill Maloof down there in the eastern suburbs, this guy, he turns up and he wears very plain clothes. He doesn't try to outshine anybody. He gives you an honest answer. How much is his property worth? He'll tell you. If someone else is telling you it's worth more, he'll say, well, go and, you feel free to sell with them. And often a lot of these people come back to him because they were oversold a promise by somebody else or whatnot. And who knows how many tens of millions of dollars he has made in commission. I'm not 100% sure, but you wouldn't know about it because he doesn't tell you and he doesn't show it off, and he just sort of tells you the truth. And one thing I remember as a young journo was that he always answered his phone. If I rang him up, he'd always answer it. And this is a guy who's selling $35 million properties to people like who I've never heard of, who are influential people around the world. And he always had time, and he would always explain things in an easy to follow way. And that sort of stuck with me a lot. And I think like that, be more like Bill is a good bit of advice that I would give to anyone in any work field.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic advice. Tim McIntyre, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Sam. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Elevate podcast, with thanks to connectnow.com.au. Don't forget to get access to all of Elite Agent's premium resources, including a detailed episode guide for this podcast. Visit joineliteagent.com.